up mga folks? Kayo ngayon ay nakikinig sa Magwari. Samahan nyo kaming magnilay-nilay at pag-usapan ng mga isyong panlipunan at iba pang nangyayari sa ating paligid. Ako si Sydelle, ang sugar and spice and everything nice na magbibigay saysay sa gabing ito.
Mula sa inyong dakilang chikadora, ako si Khayie. So, tonight napaka-special ng episode natin kasi this is our very first episode for the Pride Month and this is part of the 3 special episodes na i-offer natin sa mga tagapakinig natin. So, shout out sa partner natin na PLM SSC. Love na love namin kayo, guys. So, since yung mga tagapakinig natin, para silang mga revisto, no? So, sponsor naman dyan. May ano sila, may pasobra kami sa inyo kasi special kayo, guys. So, tonight, may very special guest din tayo for this episode. So, let's welcome Miss Amber Quiban. Yes! Hi po!
Hello everyone! Hi!
Kamusta ka naman po, Mi?
Okay naman. Medyo stressed kasi ang daming nangyayari ngayon. Pero I'm so glad to be here. It's actually my 4th or 5th time grazing APLM propaganda event. So I'm very, very happy to be back. And of course, I'm very, very excited for today's discussion.
Sydelle, ikaw, kamusta ka?
Ayan, midterms week! Oh my God, kakatapos lang natin ng midterms. Tapos ito na ngayon, meron na tayong episode. Pride Month, pa!
Let's go, te! Time natin tong mga baklasis. So, kung natatandaan ng mga listeners natin, nung first episode natin, we tackled about yung SOGIE Equality Bill. So, kahit pa paano nagkaroon tayo ng pahapyaw sa SOGIESC. So, ngayon, magda-dive in deep tayo sa SOGIESC. So, oh my God, major technical terms ulit. Oh my God, nakakahilo. Pero, before we dive in sa main topic natin, which is SOGIESC nga, may $1 million question ako kay Miss Amber. Gusto ko pang miss yung sagot, ma'am. Charot lang. So, for Miss Amber, what is SOGIESC and why is it important to learn about it?
Well, basically, SOGIESC is an aggregate of concepts, meaning to say, sama-sama siyang concepts related to our overall gender and sexuality or sexualities. That being said, SOGIESC stands for sexual orientation, that's SO, gender identity, that's GI, tapos yung E stands for gender expression, and SC stands for sex characteristics. So this is the aggregate component of our entire sexuality and gender. So under these concepts are labels. Okay, these are labels that we use in our conversation in understanding our gender and sexuality. The importance of talking about SOGIESC tells us the importance of, that conversation in talking about our sexuality and gender. Because for the longest time, we have been told and taught na we shouldn't be open about talking about our genders. We shouldn't be talking about our sexuality. Even sex in itself is considered a taboo in our cultures, in our society. So SOGIESC actually offers us, part the academic perspective, but at the same time, it's also experiential perspective on how we deal with our gender and sexuality. So I guess it's very, very important to talk about SOGIESC because it helps you understand yourself better, or not yourself entirely, but a component of yourself better.
Grabe, uwian na, may nanalo na. Charot lang po. Pero may follow-up question po ako, no? With that being said nga po, kasi nasabi niyo nga po na dito nga sa Pilipinas, napaka-tabu pag-usapan yung gender and yung sex. So, ano po yung significance ng magkaroon tayo ng kaalaman with regards to SOGIESC for the youth and for the older generation? Kasi alam naman natin na may sa mga older generation na talagang iwas sila sa mga usapang ganito.
Well, the conversation on SOGIESC, depending on the age group, really is very difficult. I have experiences talking to parents on SOGIESC of their children, and it was a very difficult conversation to have, primarily because they have a different belief on what SOGIESC is. They really don't understand that SOGIESC doesn't necessarily mean you're part of the LGBT community. For them, SOGIESC is, you're automatically gay, you're automatically lesbian. So we have to clarify these concepts, not just for our generation, okay, not just for our generation, but also to other generations, especially to the older ones, because they are the ones who are making policies as of the moment. They are the ones making legislations as of the moment. And we see this with the SOGIE Equality Bill. Many of our legislators who come from an older generation who had a different conception of what sexuality and gender is do not understand what SOGIE is. And now it's giving us more difficulty explaining the message of equality to them because they do not understand the very essence of SOGIES, that everyone has a SOGIES. Whether you're straight, whether you're gay, whether you're lesbian, bisexual, transgender, you have a SOGIES. And the message there is that everyone should be entitled to their own sets of rights, to their equal sets of rights, because their SOGIES should not be a reason for them to be discriminated. But again, of course, because of the differences in the generation and in the understanding of what SOGIES is, it's causing us difficulties in the legislation. But at the same time, for the youth, let's take this opportunity to really understand ourselves because in the Philippines, we are currently one of the top ranking countries when it comes to incidence of teenage pregnancy. And in Southeast Asia, we rank first amongst countries with the highest new incidence of HIV. And when we talk about SOGIES, we talk about exploration, we talk about discovery of our sexualities. So we need to talk about SOGIES and we need to talk about it and couple it with the conversation on sex education. That SOGIES should be a part of a comprehensive sex education curriculum in the country because we should not stop children to discover about themselves. We shouldn't allow them to discover themselves on their own terms without the help and assistance of people who could help them and guide them in the right direction. Because we understand in the past that these kinds of experimentations would lead to consequences that none of the people involved are ready for. So overall, we need to talk about SOGIES in any generation and discuss the hard truth of these concepts to any generation because it will help us really understand ourselves and how we understand our sexualities and how we explore it moving forward.
So, go, Sydelle.
Grabe.
Introduce ka na.
Ayun nga.
Kaya mo ba? Mm.
Kayang-kaya pati, grabe, ang saya kayang maging educated and the opportunity to educate pa, di ba? So,
Mm-mm.
as Miss Amber said nga, no, learning SOGIESC nga is a one step forward in exploring your sexuality and helping people na paano nga ba yung mga ganitong terms, ano nga ba tong mga terms na to, and how it could help you understand yourself. So, let's dive in kung ano ba ang mga concepts and terms ang nasa SOGIESC natin. So, sexual orientation, Miss Khayie, ano nga ba ang mga nasa under ng sexual orientation?
So, the term sexual orientation kasi, ito kasi yung nakifeel mo sa ibang tao. Ito yung emotional, romantic, physical attraction mo sa ibang tao. Pero let's take note na ang emotional, ang romantic and ang sexual attraction mo ay magkaiba. So, yung mga kakilala ko na homoromantic sila pero bisexual sila. So, let's take note of that para sa mga listeners natin. So, mga terms under the sexual orientation is yung heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, pansexual, and yung queer. So, for the heterosexual, this is the majority of people. So, this is a term that describes a person who feels attraction towards the opposite gender. And then, for the homosexual naman, is naka-under dito yung mga gay and yung mga lesbians. So, ito yung mga taong nakaka-feel ng attracted sa same gender nila. And for the bisexual, these are people who feel attracted to individuals of more than one gender. And then sa pansexual naman, ito nalilito mostly yung mga friends ko dito. Ano ba pinagkaiba ng bisexual tsaka ng pansexual? So si pansexual kasi, sila yung mga tao na nakaka-feel ng attraction regardless of the gender. So gender blind sila. So ayun, dati kasi, share ko lang naman. Dati kasi I identify as bisexual, pero now kasi parang, ayun nga, since nagkaroon na ng madaming labels under the bisexual, which is bi plus pa nga, I don't really associate myself with the label anymore kasi hindi ko na nga, parang feel ko hindi na ako doon mag-identify. Kasi I feel na parang, basta, love ko yung lahat, ganon. So parang, more of nag-under ako sa pansexual kasi, basta love kita, ganon. Nirerespeto mo ako, nirerespeto ko, love kita, okay. Pero ayun nga, sa dami ng distinctions na nangyari under the term na bisexual, nagkaroon na ako ng parang confusion dun sa terms na yon. So, ano pa ba yung mga yung ibang mga terms under the bisexual po ba? Kasi medyo
Bisexuality kasi is an umbrella concept. Meaning to say, if it's an umbrella concept, it's a super concept and there are other concepts under it. Bisexual kasi is generally characterized as the attraction to the same and a different gender, okay? So not necessarily opposite. Kasi nga, by saying na opposite, there's just two genders. But we acknowledge nga that there are more than two genders, okay? Male, female, agender, um, genderqueer, 'di ba? So marami pang other genders aside from man at woman or male female. So when we see bisexual nga, going back to the definition, it's the attraction to the same. So if you're a woman, you're attracted to fellow women and different. So you could be attracted to men, you could be attracted to non-binary people, you could be attracted to genderqueer people, to agender people, that's okay. That all falls under the concept of bisexuality. But given that the definition of bisexuality is very, it's very encompassing, different. Sabi niya kasi, it says different. So there is no limit to how many other genders you are attracted to. Okay? So under the bisexual umbrella, we have bisexual, polysexual, and pansexual. When you say bisexual, in the most traditional sense, you are attracted to two genders. Okay? The same gender and another different gender. Okay, just one. So it could be with men, it could be with genderqueer people, but just two in the traditional context. Okay? And then the next concept is polysexual, meaning to say it's the attraction to more than two, but not all genders. Okay? So more than two. So you could be attracted to men, you could be attracted to women, but you could be attracted to genderqueer people, but not to non-binary and what you call this, agender people. Or you could be attracted to all gender except men. Okay? That happens by a lot. So that happens. So that's a polysexual person. So that's the concept of polysexuality. More than two, but not all. Now, pansexual, as you've mentioned, is gender blind. Um, Disregarding any bias on the gender identity of the person they are attracted to, they could be attracted to a person. So they could be attracted to a man, a woman, genderqueer, gender non-binary, a gender, etc. Kung meron pang other genders that exist out there. So that is the concept of bisexual as an umbrella concept. Okay.
Okay, so medyo naano ako. Pero thank you, Miss Amber, for the clarification. So moving on is yung asexual. So this is a term to describe yung mga people na nakaka-feel sila ng little to no sexual attraction to other people. So, ayun, so pag sinasabi ng mga tao sa akin na, ay, hindi ako part ng LGBTQ plus community, tapos may kakalala ko, malalaman ko na asexual pala sila. So, you're part of the community already. So, ayun nga, sabi ko nga rin kanina na magkaiba yung sexual attraction and yung romantic attraction natin. So, under ng asexual is yung mga aromantics natin. So, another term for them is yung mga aces nga. So, similar lang din. They feel little to no romantic attraction to other people. So, yung queer, umbrella term siya, pero generally kasi, hindi pa siya tinatanggap ng community. Kasi, as far as I know, slur siya dati. Pero ayun, I identify as queer. So, ayun. Nag-encompass dito yung yung mga non-cisgender, non-heterosexual, identity, relationship, behavior, or desire. So, ayun. Etong term na to, yung queer, siya, ina-acknowledge niya na yung sexuality and yung gender identity is a spectrum and it is also fluid as opposed to those other terms na sinabi natin which is mutually exclusive categories sila. So, what is next, Sydelle?
So, ayun nga, no? Yung next natin is GI or the gender identity. Gender identity, it reflects a deeply felt and experienced sense of one's own gender or how you perceive yourself. Gender identity is internal and pwede rin siyang hindi necessarily visible to others. We have our umbrella terms under gender identity. First is the cisgender. This is the gender identity na nag-align with their sex assigned at birth. It can be a cisgender man or cisgender woman. And next is our transgender. Gender identity na kung saan different yung gender identity nila based on their sex assigned at birth. Being transgender does not imply any specific sexual orientation. So they can be transgender and can identify as straight or a gay, lesbian, bisexual, etc. And also, being transgender is not only limited naman in medical transitioning na sinasabi na minsan you cannot be a transgender if you parang hindi mo pinalitan yung genitals mo and such. If the person said na they identify as trans man or woman, then they are trans man or woman. Trans folks don't have to prove their transability just to prove that they're worthy of to be called trans. Ganon. It is or wala tayo sa position na magsabi sa kanila kung ano nga ba yung gender identity nila. Like, nandito tayo to respect and support them. Lovingly.
Sorry, Sydelle. Siguro clarification lang on gender identity. The gender identities that we talk about are being a man, being a woman, being genderqueer, being agender, or being gender non-binary. Those are the common genders kasi that we currently talk about. Of course, there is a possibility for more, and we are not closing the door for that. Those are the gender identities. Now, being cisgender and being transgender is actually the condition of your gender identity. Okay? It's not, so, meaning to say, being transgender is not a gender identity. It is the condition of your gender identity. Meaning to say, condition siya because your gender identity, for example, in my case, I identify as a woman, my gender identity does not match the gender that was assigned to me at birth. So that condition, that condition of a concept is called transgender. Okay? So it's actually wrong to say that my gender identity is a transgender woman. I am a transgender woman. That is not my identity. That is not my gender identity. That is my experience of my gender identity. So I am a transgender woman. Now, if you ask me what my gender identity is, I will answer you, I am a woman. Okay? So, focus tayo doon sa concept ng gender nga. So, yung genders kasi natin is man, woman, genderqueer, gender non-binary, agender. So, yon. automatically kasi, if you're gender non-binary, if you're gender queer, if you're agender, automatically you're already transgender because in our culture, we don't recognize yet fully as a society the concepts of gender identity. And you're still assigned a binary gender at birth. Okay? So, automatically, pag sinabi mong agender ka, if you say na you're gender queer, eh wala namang gender queer pag pinapanganak ang bata, 'di ba? Wala namang agender pag pinapanganak ang bata. So automatically, when these are your gender identities, automatically you're a transgender person. In my case, yun nga, medyo binary yung conditions ko, so medyo mas madali siya. I was assigned male at birth, a man, but of course, I identify as a woman. So, I am a trans woman. So, yun. Clarification lang on that, kasi ang dami pa rin namamali on the concept of gender identity. Thinking na the concepts of gender identity revolve around the concepts of cisgender and transgender. When in fact, these two concepts are concepts that describe the experience in relation to our gender identities.
Learnings. Oh, pa. Diba? Ang saya-saya mag-learn. Oh, so, ang magiging gender identity ngayon is man, woman, or the gender queer, gender binary, agender, and non-binary. Oh, wait. Yeah. So, ayun nga. Next is natin is yung nga na non-binary in gender identity. Yung non-binary is does not identify exclusive as a man or a woman. Non-binary people may identify as being both a man and a woman, somewhere in between, or as falling completely outside these categories. It also an umbrella term encompassing identities such as a gender, bigender, genderqueer, and or gender fluid. Yeah. Next is um, gender expression natin. This is the external presentations of one's identity. It can be expressed through behavior, clothing, body characteristics, or voice. It can or it may or may not conform to socially defined behaviors or yung mga typical characteristics na nakikita natin in the society. Gender expression is a spectrum also. It can be in more on mask or androgyny or a feminine. Yeah, it's a spectrum. Then lastly natin, Kai, what is SC?
Before that, gusto ko lang i-share na yun nga, di ba? I identify as a non-binary. Usually, tinatanong sa akin ng mga tao, so ano ka ba talaga, babae, lalaki? Ano, pero kasi, para sa akin kasi, I identify, yun nga, specifically as non-binary and gender fluid. Gusto ko lang i-clarify sa mga taong nagtatanong sa akin na kung ano yung nafe-feel ko, yun lang yun. Kasi, for me kasi, gender is fluid talaga and also sexuality. So, I don't really, parang more pa nandun kasi ako sa gray area. So, ayun. Gusto ko lang naman, I wanna put it out there lang naman. Kasi parang medyo nakaka-offend din kasi na tatanungin ka na gano'n na, kuwari, may isang araw na masculine yung yung expression ko or yung identity ko. Parang natanong nila, parang the next day parang magtataka sila, bakit parang sobrang babaeng-babae ka ngayon? Hindi ba pwedeng sabihin na lang natin na na ganun ako. Hindi, okay na yung ganun. Huwag mo na akong husgahan, ganun. So, ayun. Moving on.
At
So,
pwede
yung
naman
SC,
natin sabihin it's none of your business kasi my gender identity and my gender expression is my personal choice. It's my personal
yes.
understanding of my body, of myself, and my identity. And I feel like the problem with, I feel you kasi I have a lot of friends who are gender queer and they get asked a lot, they get quizzed a lot about their identity. And I guess that's the problem of living in a generally binary society. Kasi our world revolves around the idea that it's either black or white. It cannot be or. So parang, alam mo yon, people insist na you should stick to just one um, just one way of expressing yourself. You just stick to one way of identifying yourself. And parang that's one way. That's in general one way. Identifying as genderqueer is one way. But for them kasi they don't see it as one way kasi when you say that you're genderqueer, you are not bound by rules. So you could be very feminine, you could be very masculine, alam mo yon, you could be both at the same time. And they don't like that kasi that's not one at a time. So parang for them, nako-confuse sila. So I feel like we really also need to teach society to unlearn yung pagkahumaling natin sa binary ideas and binary concepts, that we need to go beyond the binary because our lives and experiences as human beings goes beyond black and white because we have an entire rainbow to explore.
Saka ayun nga, share ko lang uli yung personal experience ko regarding that. Kasi may kamag-anak ako na feminine siya, lalaki siya, cisgender man siya. So feminine siya mag-express ng sarili niya. So parang nililabel siya na bakla, ganyan. Tapos yung mga parents ko, nagulat sila na one day, nagkaroon siya ng asawa na babae. Kasi nga nasanay na sila na feminine nga yung niya pagka-present ng sarili niya. Tapos, nagulat sila one day na may anak na pala tapos may asawa na babae. So, yun nga, dapat matuto tayo na i-unlearn nga yung mga binaries na idea na talagang in-instill sa utak natin. So, I'm very proud na since nga advocate in the making tayong mga youth, yes, nag-undergo ng metamorphosis, yun nga, unti-unti naman nating nararadicalize yung idea na yan. So, ayun. Moving on sa discussion natin, which is yung last nga sa SOGIESC, yung SC, yung sex characteristics. So, may dalawang type siya, which is yung primary and yung secondary sex characteristics. So, for the primary sex characteristic, this pertains to the inner and outer genitalia, yung chromosomal and hormonal structure ng tao, and yung reproductive anatomy niya. So, dito, mas nagpo-focus siya sa mga underrepresented nating mga intersex people. So may mga tao kasi na later on in life pa nila nalalaman na intersex pala sila. So hindi siya nagma-manifest na at birth makikita mo na siya. So meron kasi na case akong nabasa na magpapa-surgery siya, hindi ko alam kung anong surgery, pero lalaki siya, nalaman niya na may pala siya, may uterus if I'm not mistaken. So ayun. Tapos, sa secondary sex characteristics naman, this is the muscle distribution, yung fat distribution, facial or body hair. So, etong primary and secondary sex characteristics, they work hand in hand. So, let's go, bio-major muna ako dito. May nabasa akong research paper na mostly talaga ang responsible is yung mga hormones natin. So, may mga babae na medyo mataas yung testosterone level nila kaysa sa estrogen level nila. So, ayun nga, ang ng physical features na nagmamanifest sa kanila is mostly mabalbon sila, so may mga facial hair sila. So, yun, they work hand in hand, yung yung primary and yung secondary sex characteristics. So, ano ba yung pinagkaiba ng sex and gender, Sydelle?
So, ayun nga, as throughout nga minsan, pag-i-interchangeable yung sex or gender na kung minsan sa ginagamit, ganun. Sex is more on biological attributes in humans. So, it's more on yung assigned at birth natin na yung sa genitals and such. Dito pumapasok nga yung sinabi ni Khayie na yung intersex, na a person is born with a reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't seem to fit the typical definitions of female or male. Na minsan nga na parehas nga yung genitals na meron sila na hindi talaga presence at birth pa lang. Then for our gender is, ito yung nagre-refer as socially constructed roles, behaviors, expressions, and identities of girls, women, boys, men, and gender diverse people. Na more on talaga sa social, societal roles na na nurture natin as period of time elapses, ganun. Once gender is not confined to a binary nga, na it's only just the two options na it's either you're a man or a woman. Na nor is it static na dyan ka lang yung label mo. It exists along a continuum or a spectrum and can change over time. Or maybe pwede rin naman na do not enclose yourself in a label. So whatever that you feel free or and comfortable, just be you. You do you, ganun. So, in learning SOGIESC, of course, it can lessen the stigma and can educate more about the topic and also the LGBTQ plus community. While we're at it na yun syempre sa topic, let's also dive in sa mga discrimination na nararanasan based on SOGIESC. Na in being informed about these issues, we can know how to lessen nga these issues, and we also know how we can protect our LGBTQIA plus community. So, people with diverse SOGIESC in all around the world, kahit anong age siya, mapabata, mapatanda, or any of the religion and such, suffer from violations of their own human rights. It can be physical, verbal, psychological abuse. Na minsan nga ay just because of their SOGIESC, nasa discriminatory na talaga yung nararanasan nila and grabe yung danger na nararanasan. Any thoughts on that, Miss Amber?
Well, for me in general, it's unacceptable in this day and age to still, condone acts of discrimination and violence against people with diverse SOGI. Um, that's very archaic. That's very what? 1700s, 1800s. We have already reached a point that we have the first transgender woman to walk the Miss Universe stage. We are already at a point where trans men, lesbian women are allowed to become leaders in their own spaces. Um, pero kasi, I feel like there are different forms of discrimination that we have to unpack. Okay? There are different forms of discrimination that we have to unpack. Of course, we have the outright discrimination. Yung face value discrimination na you know that it's a discriminatory act. Meaning to say, you laugh at people, you force them to become humiliated, ganyan, you humiliated them on spaces, you make fun of them, you bully them, ganyan, in schools, for example. But there's also this concept of benevolent discrimination or benevolent sexism, meaning to say, when you say benevolent discrimination or sexism kasi, at face value, it feels like it's not harmful at all. But when you analyze it deeper, it's actually very, very harmful. And how do these cases of benevolent discrimination occur? For example, school uniform, 'di ba? School uniform at face value, parang ano namang issue sa school uniform? It's just clothing, right? But when you analyze it deeper, that's exactly the problem for trans people, for transgender students. Will you allow, as an institution, your trans students to wear the uniform they identify with and they are comfortable with? That is the question there. Because for many schools, for many institutions, they do not allow that. They do not allow transgender students, trans kids, trans boys and trans girls to wear uniforms that conform with their gender identities. So that is one case of benevolent sexism. Ano pa? Haircut. Diba? And as if your hair would affect your performance at school. The third one, I guess, is mas kailangan siya ng further discussion. But there is this movement to see queer mediocrity on television. Queer mediocrity, as in queer people doing mediocre things. Why? Because queer people, for the longest time, have always been expected to be their best. to be the best person in whatever they do. And that is discriminatory. Why? Because it's as if you are saying that in order for you to make up for your being queer, you need to be good at this. In order for you to compensate being a lesbian, you need to be very good at this. So when you're mediocre and you're a member of the LGBTQ plus community, people were like, you're gay na nga tapos hindi ka pa magaling sa kahit ano. Parang, am I required to be good at everything? I mean, you're straight and still you're not good at anything. 'Di ba? So, that is benevolent sexism and discrimination. That is discriminatory when you expect queer people to be the best all the time just because they're queer. Because there is an underlying expectation that because they're queer, they need to compensate for their queerness and be the best in whatever they do. These are cases of discrimination. And these are cases of discrimination that we need to unpack because, people would tell you, so what if we're expecting you to be the best? Ayaw mo ba yun? People are cheering you to be the best? Like, hindi nga siya magaling dun sa field na yun eh. For example, in my case, people expect me to be the best speaker. I mean, I'm a good speaker. I'm a decent speaker. But I won't necessarily say that I'm the best speaker. But because I'm in the communication program, ganyan, I'm a transgender woman, people expect me na you're the best speaker. Na you're not allowed to stutter. You're not allowed to have dead air. You're not allowed to have fillers. Na for me, as a human being, I am allowed to have fillers because I am not the best speaker out there. I am a decent speaker, yes, but I'm not the best speaker. So you cannot expect me to not commit these common errors that an ordinary regular speaker would commit just because I am a transgender woman, just because you expect me to be the best because of how you see and stereotype my gender identity. So, there are cases like that na parang, 'di ba, sino ba dito yung naka-experience when they were in high school, especially those who came out in high school na, oh, bakla ka but you have to be the best in your class. You need to be the top student in your class. You need to graduate valedictorian or salutatorian. 'Di ba? These are unfair expectations that we do not impose to straight people. Because to tell you quite frankly, it is the straight people who take the bottom of the pack. And that says a lot. And that is because we are forced and we are compelled to do our best. And that is discrimination. So, in this day and age, we should not allow discrimination. And if you are a bystander just looking at discrimination take place, you should probably reassess your values and your principles because no one should ever be a bystander to cases of discrimination. If you see a case of discrimination taking place, call it out. Call it out and defend the person who is being discriminated. Because if you don't do anything, you are as bad as the person who is doing the act. Always remember that. If you are a bystander and you choose not to do anything once you see a case of discrimination, you are as bad as the bully.
Grabe, sobrang agree ako doon sa sinabi ni Miss Amber na I think, isa rin sa mga makukonect na sinabi din ni Miss Amber is yung media representation ng mga gays here in the Philippines na gaya na lang nung kay Vice Ganda. Actually, discussion to sa PLM-PPG nung nakaraan sa GC na yung mga FM daw ng mga bakla kailangan the best sila at everything para lang mapatunayan sa pamilya nila na may place sila sa pamilya na yon. And actually, it's the same case for the lesbians na kailangan may magawa ka muna just to prove na you have the place for the family. Kasi ayun nga, napakasalimuot tsaka napakalungkot isipin na in a Filipino household, yun nga, napaka-toxic ng culture din kasi ng Filipino household na ayun nga, kailangan lalo na pag part ka ng community, kailangan may mapatunayan ka. So, part ako nun, sadly. Pero ayun nga, ano pa ba sasabihin ko? Kalimutan ko na. Sydelle, take the wheel. Nakamute ka, sis.
Yes, at night sis. So, ayun nga, no, ang masalimuot talaga ang nararanasan natin na kung saan meron din minsan na offset yung SOGIESC ng isang tao, yung sinasabi na, alam mo matalino ka, kaso bakla ka. And such like that, na ang backhanded compliments na parang ang pangit tignan sa mata ng sa culture natin na isa kang ganito, isa kang ganyan, kahit maganda yung napoproduce mo or yung nakikita talaga sa'yo, basta yung thought na nasa LGBT community ka, parang nagiging bad side siya ng isang tao, which is not kasi it is a part of you and it is not a bad thing to have it, na you can say naman na alam mo ang talino mo and yun gano'n na hindi siya bot, na hindi siya wrong thing to say and such like that. And sa mga gano'n na pangyayari, grabe talaga yung effect nun sa psychological aspect ng isang tao na nakakababa lang siya ng self-esteem. Ayun.
Yung tipong ginawa mo naman yung lahat ng best mo pero parang hindi pa rin enough para sa kanila. Eh di bahala kayo dyan. Ako magtatrabaho para sa sarili ko, hindi naman ako nag-aano para sa inyo. I'm doing it for me. I'm not doing it for you. As long as wala akong natatapakan na ibang tao, then I'm good. Di ba? So yun nga. Moving on sa discussion natin. Yung dito rin sa Pilipinas kasi yung mga legislators natin nagkukulang din sila sa pag-pass ng mga comprehensive anti-discrimination law na pumoprotekta sa atin. So, syempre, sasabihin nila, kasi kayo lang naman poprotektahan yan, ganito, ganyan. So, bakit pa kailangan magkaroon ng anti-discrimination law para sa mga bakla? No! Ang SOGIE Equality Bill is, kasama kayo doon. May SOGIE din kayo. So, actually, it does not exclusively protect the LGBTQ plus community, but rather all of us. Kasi, sila din naman may SOGIE sila. So, ayun nga, ayoko na lang talagang mag-talk kasi pero ayun, what's your reaction to this, Miss Amber, na ayun nga, yung mga senators natin, sila mismo yung mismong mahadlang sa SOGIE Equality Bill kasi yun nga, sabi nila, mismong the community lang naman yung poprotektahan nito.
You know, it's actually very, very disappointing, no? I've been in the advocacy since 2012, so you do the math kung ilang taon na ako sa advocacy. And it's very, very disappointing that every Congress, we are left with empty promises that they will pass this. Tapos at the end of the Congress, ay wala naman palang na-achieve. Back to square one. Diba? My biggest heartbreak actually was during the 17th Congress, the last Congress before this one, because we're currently in the 18th Congress. During the 17th Congress, we were able to pass the SOGIE Equality Bill in the House of Representatives up to the third reading, and it was approved, okay? So, policy making 101 tayo. What happens if there is already an approved version in the House of Representatives? It needs to wait for a counterpart version from the Senate, right? So, after mapasa ng SOGIE Equality Bill sa House of Representatives ng September, if I'm not mistaken, September, sabi namin, sige, focus na tayo sa Senate. So, exert kami lahat ng effort namin papuntang Senate. And to think na most of the advocates are based in QC. So like, imagine gaano kalayo yung Senate mula sa QC, di ba? But we go there. We go there to attend the sessions, to show our support, to manifest our desire for a SOGIE Equality Bill. In fact, super funny kasi nagkaroon pa kami ng event na namigay kami ng mga balloons, namigay kami ng mga payong, namigay kami ng mga pins, namigay kami ng mga cake, namigay kami ng mga letters. Ang dami namin pinagbibigay doon sa mga senador natin with the messaging na please do this not for the LGBT community but for the entire country because we do not know sino ba ang mga members ng community who are facing discrimination. We do not have a profile for that, something like that. or nung Valentine's, let this season of love be the season wherein you will give us the love that we deserve. Ganyan, ganyan. Or nung Christmas, this season of giving, give us our only wish, which is the SOGIE Equality Bill. Ang dami naming pakulo, ang dami naming messaging na ginawa for SOGIE Equality Bill. But the saddest part is, there are senators who actually co-authored the SOGIE Equality Bill in the Senate, who committed to interpolate the SOGIE Equality Bill but did not attend the interpellation. In fact, they caused the delay of the interpellation. So we never got past the period of interpellation and we never got it approved past second reading. So that for me was the most heartbreaking experience I've had for 9 years in the advocacy. Kasi at least before the 17th Congress, there was just one version that was being filed. And that version was just being filed in the House of Reps. So by then, parang alam ko na parang, okay, wala na naman to. Sige, okay, tanggap na natin na walang SOGIE Equality Law this year, this Congress. Pero nung 17th Congress kasi, for the first time ever, nagkaroon ng Senate version eh. For the first time ever, nagkaroon ng fighting chance. At for the first time ever, naipasa siya sa House of Reps. So it was really a very heartbreaking moment for many advocates all over the country. Not just for the advocates who go to the Senate talaga, pero of course other advocates as well who get feedback and info from us and update from us regarding what's happening on the ground. It's very disappointing to have a senator who uses the Bible to justify his bigotry when it's very clearly stated in the Constitution of this country that the separation of the state and church is inviolable. How could you, as a senator, as a legislator, not understand what that portion of the Constitution means? That is beyond me. I swear, that is beyond me. I have no words for that. That in itself summarizes the studies that say that Filipinos have poor reading comprehension skills. I think I agree. Kasi how can you not get that? It's clear as day. Diba? And you have a senator who also says that the members of the LGBT community are worse than animals, when in fact, science have proven us multiple times that even animals engage in homosexual behaviors. That it's natural. That it's in fact part of nature. Diba? So, how can we have senators who do not even believe in science? Who say that transgender people are just men pretending to be women in order for them to rape women in comfort rooms? How can you not believe science? Okay? And this is the very reason why we are in this, excuse my friends, now. Kasi these same senators, legislators, do not even believe that COVID exists. That they believe in the power of ivermectin, diba? So parang, my God. So, it's very, very important for us to scrutinize. Ano lang ba yung punto ko? Bakit ko siya nirelate doon sa case ng COVID ngayon? Basically, these people do not believe in science. And for them to understand what SOGIESC means, you need to believe in science. And you need to understand what science means. And you need to have basic reading comprehension. I mean, my God. So, ang message ko lang is, kasi wala na tayong magagawa, sila na yung nakaupo dyan. Sila yung nakaupo dyan. Wala na tayong magagawa. So, magagawa na lang natin is you register. You still have until September 2021 to register and be an eligible voter for the 2022 national elections, and make sure that these people who do not believe in science, who are stupid enough to make those callous mistakes, are not elected into power and office ever and ever again, because we deserve better.
Grabe, ang powerful. Sobrang nadala ako doon sa frustration ni Miss Amber kasi syempre hindi ko rin kasi ma-voice out yung mga frustrations ko sa buhay, lalong-lalo na dito sa yung way ng pag-handle ng government natin sa COVID-19 pandemic that we have right now, which is also the LGBTQIA plus community is particularly vulnerable of. Saka yun nga, napakalungkot kasi isipin na we're just asking for the bare minimum na ipasa lang yung SOGIE Equality Bill, hindi nila magawa kasi just for the sake na hindi sila naniniwala sa siyensya. So ayun, it's sobrang napaka-speechless, hindi ko na alam kung anong sasabihin ko kasi lahat na sabi na yung Miss Amber, nandun na lahat. So ayun, sobrang napakalungkot na talagang isipin na yung tayong mga nasa bilong-bilong sa community, sobrang na-oppress tayo dahil sa mga kagagawan ng mga legislators natin. Sobrang napaka-stupid nung mga reasons nila and ng mga statements na nilalabas nila kasi mas pinapangunahan nilang i-cloud ng judgment nila yung mga opinion nila more than sa parang responsibilidad nila as legislators. So, ayun. Sydelle, what's your thoughts?
Ayun lang din naman na same thoughts lang din na mas naka-clouded nga sila ng own opinions nila, their biases, and also yun nga na sinabi, yung the separation of state and church talaga, yun talaga yung mismong pinakaambag nila kapag sa mga debate, if ever. Feel ko yun talaga yung pinakaunang-unang sasabihin nila, like according to the Bible and such. Parang hindi ata nila kayang makipag-debate kung wala na yung Bible, if ever, kapag tinanggal mo yung Bible. I'm speechless kasi parang kung sino talaga yung na-oppress, sila din talaga yung gumagawa ng paraan just to fight parang sa resistance, to fight for ourselves, na kung saan nga yung mga ganitong officials na talaga dapat ang tutulong sa atin to have our own rights, yung privileges natin and such na yun nga sinabi mo Khayie na it's bare minimum. It's our rights naman talaga na kailangan talaga natin yun to protect nga our fellow LGBTQIA plus people and such. And hindi naman talaga siya exclusive lang for us. Madami talaga din na pwedeng na inclusive sa sa law na to, hindi lang talaga siya exclusively. Kaya kailangan talaga more educating, kailangan talaga ipasok siya sa curriculum so they know na hindi lang talaga ito for the community itself. It's for all, it's for everyone since nga sinabi natin na pinaulit-ulit natin sinabi na SOGIESC is for everyone. Meron tayong ni isa nun, kahit the straights, the heteros, meron talaga sila nun, hindi lang talaga educated enough to know about it. Kaya sa mga tagapakinig talaga natin, be more mindful, be more open to education and such, and the opinions and criticisms. Ang ganda, ang sayang ma-educate and unlearn these toxic cultures and such. Ganyan. Ang saya.
Tsaka gusto ko lang i-emphasize yung sinabi ni Miss Amber kanina na wag niyong sa mga youth voters, wag niyong sasayangin yung opportunity na bumoto this next election. Kasi isipin niyo kung sasayangin niyo yung isang boto niyo, it's another 6 years na nakaka-frustrate na naman. So please mag-register kayo para makaboto tayo. Sama-sama tayong bumoto sa karapat-dapat ng mga legislators natin and yung mga deserved natin na mambabatas. Sana sa mga sa susunod na election may maayos na kandidato. So ayun, Maki-Becky, wag masyokot. Wala na bang Sydelle?
Dagdag ko lang din na wag tayo yung gayahin natin yung mga nasa karaang election, yung nagpapabayad. May nakita ako sa FB na dinivide niya yung 500 into 6 years. Kasi 'di ba sa isang president, 6 years ang kanyang regime, di ba? Regime, ganun. Um, sa 500 pesos na yun, i-split mo siya sa 6 years, ang baba ng dignidad mo, like 500 pesos ka lang sa dignidad mong yun. Kung ipapabenta mo lang yung, or yun nga, ibebenta mo yung vote mo, let's use this time for 2022 na i-lessen yung ganitong mga issues katulad nga nitong COVID-19, talagang nasala kung ano yung mga officials na meron tayo, napakita kung ano mang officials meron tayo ngayon. And it's sad na sobrang bagal ng progress natin in COVID-19 response. Ayun.
Saka ako, I really have high hopes sa generation natin kasi yun nga, tayo yung susunod na talagang mamumuno sa bayan na to. So, dapat lang, deserve naman natin to na magkaroon ng pagbabago na, ayun nga, since mga advocates in the making nga tayo, yung pag-educate natin, dapat hindi tayo close-minded. Dapat maging open-minded tayo sa lahat ng bagay. So, kunwari, sa Twitter, yun nga, napaka-aggressive kasi ng mga tao sa Twitter na may nagtanong, tapos sabihin nila, hala, bakit di mo alam, ganyan-ganyan. Tapos, ayun na, cancel culture na naman. So, ayun, wag tayo masyadong maging agresibo when it comes to educating. Dapat, yun nga, since ikaw nga yung nag-educate sa ibang tao, dapat, dapat maging open-minded ka and you should address yung question nila na parang nagtuturo ka lang sa isang bata na ikaw yung teacher, ikaw yung nagtuturo sa student mo, ganon. Let's not cancel them right away na porque hindi nila alam, talagang aatakihin mo na, tapos magtatawag ka pa ng ibang tao na, hala, bakit ganyan, 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 ganyan. Ayun. Tsaka, prominent kasi yan sa social media ngayon na, na cancel culture, napaka-toxic talaga.
Yeah, and as advocates, we need to remind ourselves that we were not born woke. Even us advocates had this bad notions and misconceptions about gender and sexuality in the past. My God, ako nga, I grew up just knowing girl, boy, bakla, tomboy, butiki, baboy. That's it. And that's part of the culture, but that's a very bad part of the culture. And growing up, I learned to unlearn that and become a better person. And we need to reflect on that. How did you become a better person in the first place? How did you, as an advocate, reach to this point na you are now sharing your message, your advocacy to other people, the message of equality to other people? We need to reflect on that and go back to that whenever we deal with people who are not yet as open-minded as we are. Kasi at one point, we weren't also as open-minded as we are now. We were also very close-minded about our ideas. My God, I even believed that Marcos was the best president. Would you believe that? I was raised in Ilocanja, so forgive me for saying that. Pero that's just a manifestation that we are capable of growth and changing over time. No? And we shouldn't take it on people if they are not yet ready to learn. We need to, massage the message to them and make it as palatable to them as possible. Because we won't win this battle alone, okay? We won't win this battle against patriarchy and cis-heteropatriarchy alone and sexism alone. We will win it together, and we need people to be there with us. And we won't get people if we continuously alienate them for one thing they say wrong. Of course, ibang usapan naman if they do it offensively, na parang you're trying to educate them and yet still they are doing it to you offensively. Ibang usapan naman yun. But what I'm trying to say is, when someone says something wrong, let's not go on their necks agad-agad na parang, mali ka, tanga ka, bobo ka. Parang, no, that's not how you should do it. And for a community that preaches love is the currency of our struggle, that would be very, very ironic that we cannot teach love to the people who hates us. Especially if our message is that we need to teach love in order to end discrimination. Diba? It's just very, very ironic for me. So yun, we don't get the message across in a snap of a finger. I've seen that. I've been to various communities all over the country, from Luzon to Mindanao. There are communities that are more open about the conversation, yes. But there are also communities who you need a little more time, massaging the message to them so that it will stick. So we do not rush change. We savor the journey towards change. And once it's there, we celebrate it. Ganun siya. Kasi kung defeatist tayo na, wala nang magbabago dyan sa mga yan, wala talagang magbabago. Kasi tayo mismo hindi naniniwalang may pagbabagong pwedeng ma-achieve. At sana itong pagbabagong to ay hindi yung scam na pagbabago. Hindi yung change coming. It should be the genuine change that we deserve for the country.
Grabe, napaka-powerful ng message. Wala na akong masabi. So, ayun, samahan niyo uli kami sa susunod na makabuluhang talakayan. Muli, ako si Khayie. Sydelle, nakamute ka.
Pasensya, technicalities. And ako, si Sydelle, ang nakapagbigay ng saysay sa gabing ito. And our special guest, Miss Amber. Hanggang
Thank you.
sa muli!
Tayo ay magwari. Thank you po, Miss Amber. Sobrang napaka-powerful.
Thank you po!